الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. We are looking at Imam Ghazali's classification of different types of reasons, and we had basically covered the fourth type. We just need to go over the text to see if we, in case if we left out anything. Warabio, the fourth type of reason is a power or the power or the faculty or the characteristic of which we talked about in the first type of reason, when that power becomes, or that characteristic becomes really strong. That power, when your rational power becomes so strong that it is able to know the long-term consequences of your action, of your plans, and is able to differentiate between immediate consequences and long-term consequences, and is able to overcome the urge to always fulfill the immediate desires by taming them, by delaying them, etc. So basically, this is the power. والرابع أن تنتهي قوة تلك الغريزة إلى أن يعرف عواقب الأمور. So the fourth type of reason emerges or develops in a human being when the basic rational faculty becomes so powerful that she's able to see beyond the immediate consequences. And it can do that when it becomes powerful vis-a-vis immediate desires and lusts, which always call for immediate fulfillment. And it does this through discipline, through taming them, through delaying them, etc. And whole spiritual exercise and the basic purpose of the spiritual exercise and the discipline of the tasawwuf is to achieve this power, really, or to make our rational power strong vis-a-vis our desires. Okay, so basically what we have here is our rational faculty matures through exercises and disciplines and become strong vis-a-vis our desires. And is able to tame those desires and curb our lust by not acting on certain desires or delaying certain other desires or taming certain other desires. Through all these exercises, which requires the purification of heart as well, this rational faculty becomes so powerful that it is able to see beyond the immediate consequences of our actions. So this insight into the beyond is awaqibul umur. So it is able to see beyond the immediate consequences. And this it does through firstly differentiating between between immediate consequences and long-term consequences. And that power allows reason to say no to certain desires, say no to certain immediate pleasures, certain immediate satisfaction, because it can see that the long-term consequences, whether they are spiritual consequences or material consequences, are harmful for our body and soul. And when we are able to, obviously nobody is perfect, you are sometime going to, and people have different levels depending on how much effort they put into it. But corresponding to this power of our reason, or desires, immediate desires and pleasures and lusts, corresponding to that and corresponding to the insight which develops as a consequence of this power, insight which develops in us to see beyond the immediate, to see beyond the immediate consequences, corresponding to this power and corresponding to the insight which develops in us through this power to see beyond the immediate consequences, a person is called more or less rational person in this fourth sense. Okay, so if you have more power over your immediate desires and your insight is more powerful to see beyond the immediate consequences, corresponding to that, you are more or less rational in this fourth sense of the word. So that's what Imam Ghazali is saying here. The fourth type of reason develops when our rational power becomes strong to such an extent that it is able to see beyond the immediate consequences. And it does this through curbing our lust, which calls us to immediate satisfaction. And by curbing the immediate pleasures, it develops this power to see beyond the immediate consequences. And when this power is achieved, the person who has this power is known as a rational person. So he's rational to the extent that he's able to do things and able to say no to things, depending on his or her insight into the long-term or the end-term consequences of a certain action, not their immediate calling or their immediate satisfaction. So they're able to, so to the extent that he can say yes or no depending on his or her insight into the consequences beyond the immediate consequences. And he or she doesn't act on every desire by saying yes, just because that fulfilling that desire will give us certain immediate pleasure and satisfaction. And this is actually something which differentiates human being from other animals, because animals don't have this, because their survival depends on their fulfilling their desires as they come or as they arise. But what differentiates human beings from other animals is that they are able to say no to certain desires. They are able to tame certain lusts. They are able to delay certain desires. They are able to delay certain pleasure. They're able to say stop certain desires. So that's what differentiates human being from other animals. And to the extent that someone A has more such power as compared to B, even though both are humans, A is more human in that sense than B. So just to wrap up this, first thing to understand is that desires are not desires and pleasures and needs are not bad in themselves. Their satisfaction is, necessary for our survival and development as a strong, wholesome human being. And desires are basically mechanism through which our body is spurred to action. So they are a source of movement and dynamism and our imagination as well as our creativity. But it is important that those desires are under our control, because when desires go beyond our control, they are no longer our desires. We actually are ruled by desire in that. Those desires. So that's why it's important to discipline our desires so that they are under our control and management. We can say yes and no to certain desire depending on our insight into their consequences, long-term consequences for our body, our soul, our morality, our spirituality, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our God, our relationship with the universe, our relationship with the other. So our self, animal self, is a collection of desires. Some of them, and if this collection of desire is disciplined and it is subservient to our reason, which is subservient to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that self is a nafs al-mutmainna, to the extent that it is naturally subservient to our rational will and the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if this collection of desires overwhelm our rational self and our and shara sharif, then this self become al-ammara to bisu, nafs al-ammara. So that's the difference between nafs al-mutmainna, and that's why desires are themselves good, but they become bad when they rule us rather than ruled by our rational will. And that's why these desires need to be disciplined, and the discipline is achieved through purification of desires and purification of heart. And one of the techniques which Islamic discipline of tasawwuf teaches us, and which Islamic morality teaches us, is through reducing our desire. So 4 basic desire needs: a need to eat, a need to sleep, a need to mingle with other people, and a need to socialize. These are, through different forms of worship, these are reduced so that desires are always subservient to our rational will and the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that we are able to differentiate between immediate and long-term benefits, and always go for the long-term benefit, or the end of every action, beyond the immediate consequences. And this, as we said last time, depends on from believing the basic distinction between ad-dunya, this world as temporary, and the hereafter, al-akhirah, that which comes after the immediate world, after the nearest world, after the whatever comes after that, and which is actually everlasting. So that distinction. So when we talk about long term or awaqibul umur, and basically the real end bit is the hereafter, where our action will be judged, whether we tamed our desires according to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we let them rule and destroy us in our life, our human life. So human person, human societies, human groups are rational, more rational, less rational, irrational, to the extent that their desires, individual and collective desires, are subservient to their rational will and the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in societies and personalities and groups where desires actually rule the rational will, and desires rule the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those desires become sovereign, and then they destroy human life, human societies, in this world as well as in the world to come. Okay, so let's go back. So the four, our rational faculty becomes so powerful that we are able to see beyond the immediate consequences, and we are able to see the long-term consequences of our actions. And this is done through this can only be done through taming and curbing our lust for immediate pleasure and immediate satisfaction. And whenever this power is achieved by a person or a society, then that person and that society and that group is called a rational person or rational society or rational group. And this rationality increase and decrease to the extent that we are powered to say yes or no to, depending on the long-term consequences, depending on the end of our actions. We are able to say yes and no to our desires and our need for desires and our lusts, which often call for immediate satisfaction. And this is one of the types of reasons which are unique to human being, and this quality of saying yes or no and discriminating between our different desires. This discrimination is actually a unique characteristics of human. This discrimination, this ability to discriminate, is actually unique to human being. That's what makes us human being and differentiate us from other animals. Because in animals, there's no nafs al-lawwama in that sense. And if there's no nafs al-lawwama, there's no nafs al-amara in them either, because their desires are how they are. Okay, so we'll stop here.